All right. Welcome to Pro Football First 50 Years, where we take the past and we bring it back to life. I'm strictly talking the first 50 years here, 1920 to 1970. I mean, you can go online. I mean, especially if you're going back to a game from like the 20s, like the 30s. And you obviously can find the box score, who won, who lost, who scored a touchdown, how far a field goal was, somebody kicked, where the game was played out, what the attendance was. You might even be able to find starting lineups for each team. But exactly what happened during the game? Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game during the first 50 years of professional football. Now, a little news flash here for you. Ain't no fancy videos or nothing like that. All there is you and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So if that's all right with you, let's get it on. And today's game, the Washington Redskins visit Franklin Field to take on the Philadelphia Eagles November 1st, 1959. Ooh. I mean, it is what it is. But wound up being a very entertaining game. Literally came down to the last seconds of the game. A very, very exciting game. So both teams were kind of going like in different directions. The Redskins were certainly not the best at times. They only had 3 wins all season long. Newsflash: this would not be one of those 3 wins. Spoiler alert. Sorry. 19. Let's say I got a lot to read here, so a lot to read. So we gotta get moving on this. All right, share the screen here. Go over to Redskins here. As I said, I mean, they only had 3 wins all season long. It was not the best of times for them. Yeah, they were actually 2-1 at one point, and after 3 weeks, were actually tied for first place. And then you can just see the wheels fell off the bus. They just lost 8 of their last 9 games, and it was all. It's not a good season. Mike Nixon, their head coach, was not the greatest of coaches. But then, to be fair, he did not have. I mean, if you look at their roster, it's not like, oh, wow, what a great roster. It's just, you look at the roster, you're like, wow, how did they win any games at all? I mean, they had a couple of these games were close, and, but, I mean, for the most part, to be fair, if you compare, like, their roster with the roster of the Baltimore Colts or the roster of the New York Giants or the Cleveland Browns or maybe the Philadelphia, there was no comparison. I mean, they just did not have a star-studded roster, period. 1959, I mean, said they only won 3 games, but that was good. Because actually, if you think about it, in 1959, they actually won more games in 1959 than they did in 60 and 61 combined. So 60, they won 1 game, and in 61, they won 1 game. So, it's not the best of times for the Washington Redskins. The Philadelphia Eagles, on the other hand, were just on the doorstep. Ready to kick in the championship door. Because obviously, we all know in 1960, they beat at Franklin Field, the Green Bay Packers, Vincent Lombardi, 17-13. Might have been a very entertaining championship game. But, I mean, also, this was also in the, from 48 until actually in 47, the Eagles went to the championship. But in 48 and 49, the Eagles won the championship, and in 1960. So, that time from 47 to 60, the Eagles were a very formidable foe. As you see right here, they were in it right toward the end, the Eagles. Now they were 7-5. Buck Shaw was a very good coach. He pulled, and you got to pat the dude on the back. He pulled. I don't want to say John Elway, because John Elway won 2 championships and then walked off on the side. Maybe like Michael Strahan. He did. Michael Strahan won that Super Bowl 42 with the Giants after the 2007 season. Then he retired. Well, Buck Shaw kind of did the same thing with the Eagles. He won the championship in 1960, and then he just walked off into the sunset on his horse, a champion, never to coach ever again. But Buck Shaw was a very good coach. He coached the San Francisco 49ers for quite some time and had a lot of success with them, and he had some success with the Eagles, obviously. This year, I mean, with the Eagles, they were 7-5. Now, obviously, they were wound up 3 games out of first place. But if you look here, right, going after the 9 weeks of the season, they were 6-3. The Giants would have been 7-2. So they were only one game out of first place heading to the final 3 weeks of the season. Well, they went into Forbes Field and got the doors blown off them by the Pittsburgh Steelers, giving them their fourth loss. And then the only hope they had was to win their final 2 games and have the Giants actually lose their final 2 games and have a playoff with each team having 4 losses. But that was not to be the case. The Giants, the Redskins, the Eagles beat the Redskins this week. But in this same week, the Eagles needed the Giants to lose. The Giants blew the doors off of the Bears. So it was all over with. But it's that. I mean, the 7-5. I mean, they lost to some good opponents here. They lost to the 49ers, who were 7-5. They lost to the Giants, who were 10-2. They lost to the Browns, who were always very good. Then they lost to the Browns again. So they lost to some good opponents. So the Eagles had a very good team. And as I said, this wound up being a very entertaining game. Now, the game was played at Franklin Field. Beautiful, beautiful. One of those, but it's still around. So I got to give, let's go to good old Wikipedia here. I said, I do got a lot to read. So I'm trying to hurry up through this here a little bit. All right, Franklin Field Wikipedia. Yeah, just newsflash. I'm a Giant fan through and through. Born in New York, born in Queens, New York. Raised out Long Island, so so I can't stand the Eagles. But I got to give them. If I had 3 thumbs, I give them freaking 3 thumbs up. What they did with Franklin Field, they renovated it. It's been around for a long time, but it's absolutely one of those beautiful, beautiful stadiums. Host the Penn Relays. I mean, it's still around. So if I had 3 thumbs, I give them 3 thumbs. It looks absolutely freaking beautiful. So I got to give them all the credit in the world for keeping Franklin Field alive. Franklin Field is a sports stadium in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the eastern edge of the University of Penn's campus, where the Penn Relays at. Named after Penn's founder, Benjamin Franklin. It is the home field for the Penn Relays and the university venue for football, track and field, and lacrosse. Franklin is also used by Penn students for recreation, intramural, and club sports, including touch football and cricket. It is also the site of Penn's commencement exercises, weather permitting, of course. Franklin Field is the oldest still operating college football site in the nation. Franklin Field was the first college stadium in the United States with a scoreboard, and the second with an upper deck of seats. In 1922, it was the site of the first radio broadcast of a football game on WIP, which is still around today, as well as the first television broadcast of a football game by Philco. From 1958 to 1970, the Franklin Field was the home to the Philadelphia Eagles. So this was the second season that the Eagles were in Franklin Field. It hosted the NFL championship game in December 1960 as the Eagles defeated the Green Bay Packers by 4.17-13. So also the Franklin Field was in 1970, talking about I'm a Giant fan, was actually the first ever Monday Night Football game for either one of these teams. First Monday Night Football game either for the Eagles or the Giants, as they obviously played each other at Franklin Field. Wound up being a good game. The Eagles wound up winning 23-20. But until around 1860, the grounds of what became Franklin Field served as a potter's field. The crania of some of these individuals were acquired by Samuel Morton and are now housed in the Penn Museum. Franklin Field was built for $100,000 and dedicated on April 20, 1895 for the first running of the Penn Relays. Imagine that. How cool is that, huh? It's been 130 years. Whew, wow. I mean, there's a lot here to read. Permanent Franklin Field construction did not begin until after the turn of the century, though, Waitman Hall Gymnasium, the stadium, and the permanent grandstands were designed by architect, were erected from 1903 to 1905 at a cost of $500,000. The field was 714 feet long, 443 feet wide. The site featured a quarter of a mile track, right? A football field, and a baseball diamond. Beneath the stands were indoor tracks and indoor training facilities. In 1916, university officials led by George Nietzsche planned with the city to build a new 100,000-seat half-sunken stadium. Plans called for a new train station called Union Station, which would feature a Pennsylvania Railroad stop and a stop on the proposed and never-built elevated subway line connected to the Market-Frankfurt line. Let's see. 5 years later, it was decided instead to expand Franklin Field. What we got here, right? So you see right over here, workmen laying bricks on the south wall of Franklin Field in 1922. The current stadium structure was built in 1920s, designed by Day and Clauder after the original wooden bleachers were torn down. The lower tiers were erected in 1922. The old wood stands were raised immediately following the pen relays, and the new concrete lower tier and seating for 50,000 were built. The second tier was added in 1925, again by Day and Clauder, when it became the second and largest two-tiered stadium in the United States. Now, I'm right here, look at this. It's just that absolutely beautiful. Absolutely freaking beautiful. And obviously you got some better shots of this right here, but basically it's like a horseshoe. Right? Franklin Field during a 1925 Penn football game. Stadium was designed of steel and concrete in the shape of a letter U. Initial cost was estimated at $725,000 at the time of construction. Oops. In the 30s and the 40s, Penn led the nation in attendance. 65,000-seat stadium was expanded each fall with temporary stands to seat 78,000. So you can imagine if the bowl was fully, I mean, it was just a bowl, how many people it might hold, huh? I mean, there we go. I mean, Franklin Field switched from natural grass to artificial turf in 1969 and became the first NFL stadium with artificial turf. Houston Oilers of the AFL, though, had artificial, but that was the previous season, but that was the AFL. After 125 years, the original 1895 concrete stands were deteriorating badly. An extensive $44 million renovation to reinforce the concrete began in 2015. The project was staggered over multiple phases, which allowed the continued use of the stadium during renovation work. Previous coatings were removed, the failing sections were replaced, and rebar throughout the structure was reinforced. The project was completed by September 2023 and received a Historic Preservation Award. I mean, just look at that. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, they did a fantastic freaking job just to keep it around. Fantastic job. And you see, this is the one, right? It's, obviously it's like still the shape of a U and everything. Penn hosts Harvard at Franklin Field, updated from a 1905 book. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. Guys, once again, I got to give Philadelphia 2 thumbs up. If I had 3 thumbs up for keeping the place around. Absolutely beautiful job, beautiful. Got some pictures here. Eagles at Franklin Field. All right, now I got, where's it at here? It was, well, of course, one of the more famous. Well, it would be, of course, the 1960 championship game right here. 17-13, will be Vince Lombardi's, unbelievable. His second season as head coach of the Packers, and he took them to the championship game. Then, of course, the next season, they would win the championship, beat the Giants 37-0. But here we go. Here's another one right here. This is but you can see in the background, right? This is the end that doesn't have the stands right here. Same thing here, right? Right. Same thing here. Right, here we go. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. I mean, yeah. You got the building here, but obviously, I mean, you look at it, you're like, where are the fans at? There's a championship. What's going on there? What, are they playing in front of nobody? No. I mean, but this is the one end, the open end. Right? This I guess must be one of the field goals that Paul Hornung kicked. But a lot of memorable games there. But of course, the Eagles only played there for so long. Then they went to 1970 was the final year that they played there. Then they went to Veterans Stadium, where that was a bowl. I mean, unfortunately, that was nothing compared to the beauty of Franklin Field here, right? The Eagles had some good times there, and they also had some bad times there. Here you go. This, I guess, is a more modern shot of it, right? Right, with the double tiered, stands. The track goes around the outside of it, and you can see in the background, right, the building and everything. Just absolutely fantastic. Beautiful. It's still around today. So as I said, absolutely fantastic. So let's got some reading to do here. We got here. So let's start off with the Evening Star, the November 1st, 1959 edition of the Evening Star. It's a Washington, D.C. paper. A little pregame action here, right? All right, so let's go here. Where are we at here? Okay, here we go. November 1st, 1959 edition of the Evening Star. Washington, D.C. paper. All right, here we go. Eagles bid faces test. Eagles bid faces test by Redskins. The ambitious Eagles play host to the floundering Redskins tomorrow at Franklin Field with a chance to take over second place in the East Division if they win. The kickoff is scheduled for 1:35, and the game will be televised in Washington over WTOP 9. Paced by the veteran Norman Van Brocklin's passing through receiving and running of Tommy McDonald and boasting a solid defense bulwark by Chuck Bednarik, the Eagles can take undisputed possession of second place if the Cleveland Browns bow to the Baltimore Colts, which does not happen. Browns, a very exciting game. The Browns wind up winning that one. The Eagles are 7-point picks, and the Colts are 8-point choices. So the 7 points wind up being a push. The Eagles could even move into a tie with the pace-making Giants if the New Yorkers lose to Green Bay, which does not happen. On the other hand, the Redskins are threatened with a drop into the cellar if they lose, which does happen. But Van Brocklin will be pitted against the Redskins' Eddie LeBaron in a passing duel at the start. Now in his 11th season, the Dutchman is expected to. All right, let's go here. Another one of the pages on November 1st of the Evening Star. Dutchman is expected to go the full route for the Eagles, but LeBaron's badly. LeBaron's has had an issue with his ankle. That certainly hurt, and they've had Ralph Guglielmi in there. He's been up and down. Even had Eagle Day in there the last game against the Browns when the game got out of hand. But their main quarterback would be Eddie LeBaron, but he's been injured. So, but LeBaron's bad ankle may force him to call on relief from Eagle Day. A sprained ankle will keep Ralph the Googe Guglielmi on the bench, and Joe Walton's ailing knee also makes him a doubtful starter for the Redskins. I mean, they don't have a go to Dan Deerdorf here for a second. They don't have a plethora of stars. Joe Walt would be on the fringe of one of those stars, and he may not be playing. So the Eagles are fired up from last week's sensational 28-24 victory over the Chicago Cardinals after trailing by 24-0. Redskins are trying to shake off the bewildering effects of two straight setbacks caused by some exceedingly sloppy football. A lot of turnovers. This will be the 43rd meeting between the two teams. The Redskins, with 3 straight wins, hold a 22-18 lead with 1 tie. The game will mark Ken McAfee's debut with the Redskins, and halfback Jim Podoley may be employed at the end for the first time. Coach Mike Nixon also has shifted his defense somewhat, putting Doyle Nix and Dick Haley in the safety positions in an attempt to stop McDonald. All right, so let's go to the Philadelphia Inquirer. A little pregame action. November 1st, 1959 edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer. There we go. Let's see what they got to say on the situation. Eagles oppose Redskins and hope to halt LeBaron. Little Eddie LeBaron and those pesky Washington Redskins are in town, and that spells trouble for the amazing Eagles as they attempt to strengthen their hold on second place in the NFL's Eastern Division at Franklin Field Sunday afternoon at 1:35. The 5'7" LeBaron, the tiniest of few mites in the sport of giants, has been the biggest pain in the neck to the Eagles of any individual in their division over the years. He's beaten them on all but 2 of the 10 occasions he's faced them since 1950. Wow. Very impressive. He's missed 2 games, though. He'll be back at the throttle after missing the last 2 games because of an ankle injury. The Redskins are counting on his return, putting them back in the win column after 2 successive defeats. He'll be backed up by Ralph the Googe, former Notre Dame star and former All-American. The Redskins, tied for 4th at 2-3, also anticipate a lift from halfbacks Jim Podoley and Ed. You can see right here, right? The comparison to the Eagles have certainly, and we've only played 5 games so far, right? So you can see the Eagles have put up some points. The Redskins have not. The Redskins have given up a lot of points. Eagles got more first down. The Redskins have, got to give them credit, have had very good running game. Their passing game has been rather poor, but their running game has been very good. That is one thing I got to give them credit for. Halfbacks Jim Podoley and Ed Sutton, who also have come off the injured list. The Eagles are 3-2 and full of pepper as a result of their spectacular victory over Chicago Cardinals and Minneapolis. Now, the Cardinals, just to make a long story real short, had 2 of their home games were played in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the Twins played, or the Minnesota Vikings played at. Because the Cardinals were trying to get out of Chicago, and they were trying to find where else can we go to draw some fans. But at the 2 home games that they played in Minneapolis, where they only drew like a little over 20,000 for the Eagles. I guess like 22 or so. But then they played the Giants there as well, and that only got 25 or 26,000 fans. So they realized a triumph over the Redskins would greatly enhance their chances of being in contention all the way. Though not apt to sit back on their laurels because of the memory of the two painful defeats the Redskins inflicted on them last year. The season's largest home crowd, 30,000 or more, if the weather is good, also could be a factor in inspiring another solid performance from the green and white, who beat the Giants and Steelers in the previous home games. The return to form of Pete Retzlaff, who caught 6 passes against the Cardinals, figures to have the Eagles' arm at its peak. Having completely recovered from his leg injury, he'll start at the end for the first time this season in place of Bobby Walston. Only the likely change would be rookie Art Powell taking over at left safety in place of Gene Johnson, and the latter's arm is still painful. He injured it in the first half of the Cards game and sat out the second half. There's anticipated lineup. Now you'll notice, right? I mean, the Eagles had Sonny Jurgensen and Norm Brocklin. All right, so we got that. So let's go to the let's get off and running here, right? At the Philadelphia Inquirer, the November 2nd, 1959 edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer. All right, here we go. 39,854 see the Eagles edge Redskins 30-23. Almost 40,000 fans. Not bad. Got a couple pictures here. Huge turnout. Almost 40,000 at Franklin Field was treated to entertainment in varying forms. Here at Redskins, Don Bossler puts on tumbling exhibition as he dives into the end zone for a second quarter score. Dude's laying on his head there. Later, Bossler was tossed on his pants as he tried vainly. 3 times the score from the Eagles won. The Eagles joined in the fun a little later, but Redskins' Bill Anderson probably wishes they'd stayed out of it. In this conga line maneuver, Bill is sandwiched between Art Powell, number 87, vainly trying to intercept Washington's pass, and Chuck Weber, 51. Tom Brookshire, 40, also latches on. And it's a hell of a conga line I got going on there. The visitors were halted on the 6-inch line as the game ended. Wow. Spiking a spectacular Washington rally with a tremendous goal line stand in the closing seconds, the Eagles squeezed out a 30-23 decision over the Redskins for their 4th victory in a wild battle that left 39,854 limp from the excitement at Franklin Field Sunday afternoon. The Eagles had to fight as never before to avoid a stalemate after enjoying a 30-9 halftime lead. The Redskins, directed by old Eagles nemesis Eddie LeBaron, made an incredible comeback to score 2 last-period touchdowns and come within inches of another as the game ended. With 1 minute 20 seconds remaining, the 5'7" LeBaron completed a desperation 4th down pass of 49 yards to end Bill Anderson, who was barely caught from behind and thrown on the 3 by diving Tom Brookshire. Wow. Dick Haley smashed to the 1 before being stopped by Jess Richardson. Then fullback Don Bossler, who had scored two of the Redskins' touchdowns and who had torn the green and white line to shreds throughout the sunny afternoon, was called upon to save the day. 3 times he hurled his granite 215 pounds into the middle of the Eagle line, and 3 times he was hurled back short of the goal in a dramatic and thrilling a stand as has ever been seen on the Penn Gridiron or any other field for that matter. 6 inches away. Well, the Eagle linemen deserved the glory as they took possession 6 inches from the goal. Time ran out before the ball could be put back into play. The spine-tingling stand more than atoned for the manner in which they had been outplayed throughout the second half of a bruising scrap filled with long runs and great plays. The defensive unit not only saved the day, but also made possible what turned out to be the winning touchdown in the closing seconds of the first half. Linebacker Chuck Weber intercepted a pass and, after running 8 yards, lateraled it to Jim Carr, who dashed 26 yards to the 3. On the very next play, Norman Van Brocklin, after drawing in Redskin defenses with a fake handoff to Clarence Peaks, passed to Tommy McDonald, who made a falling catch for the TD in the end zone. The score came with 16 seconds left in the half and just 29 seconds after Van Brocklin had teamed up with Bobby Walston on a 22-yard touchdown pass that had capped a 61-yard drive. So, I mean, they scored a couple of touchdowns, right at the end of the first half. Philadelphia's largest football crowd of the year had every reason to expect these two lightning tallies to take all the heart out of the Redskins, especially as Billy Barnes, Peaks, and Van Brocklin had the Eagles' offense clicking at maximum efficiency. Barnes had an even greater day than he had the week before when he led the 28-point second-half rally that nipped the Cards at Minneapolis. He dashed 61 yards for the first touchdown on the third Eagle play from scrimmage and contributed 163 yards on 13 carries all told. Wow. Peaks running harder than at any time this season, blasted for 57 yards and scored the Birds' second touchdown on a 2-yard ram over right guard to cap the 69-yard drive, the third time the Eagles had the ball. Paige Cothran, making his home debut, had kicked a 46-yard field goal. It just barely skimmed over the bar in between the two TDs, so the Eagles had a 16-0 lead before a minute had elapsed in the second quarter. Then Bosler, who splintered. All right, let's go back to the Philadelphia Inquirer here. November 2nd, 1959 edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Then Bosler, who... What was that there? Who splintered the Eagles line for 168 yards on 23 carries in the most magnificent display of ball carrying of any visitor to date, started going to town to provide the inspiration the Redskins needed. Bosler, former Miami ace, dashed 41 yards up the middle for Washington's first TD on the ninth play of an 80-yard drive early in the fourth quarter. In all, Don contributed 69 yards with 6 carries on the advance. He led another drive of 57 yards that penetrated to 17 before the Eagles forced Sam Baker to kick a field goal from the 24. That made it 16-9 before the Eagles erupted for their 2 touchdowns in the last 45 seconds of the half. Bosler scored a second TD on a 1-yard plunge early in the second half to conclude a drive that stemmed from Ralph Felton's pass interception and 6-yard run to the Eagles' 42. Next time the Redskins got the ball, the result of a Bob Toniff recovering a Peaks fumble on the Eagles' 27, they scored on an 8-yard pass by LeBaron to Jim Podoley, who made a falling catch in the end zone. With Cothran missed a field goal shot from the 42 on the only occasion the Eagles reached enemy territory in the second half, the Redskins got the ball from a last-ditch 79-yard drive that almost prevented their 4th defeat in 6 games. So there's the lineups, but as I said, but there was no score in the third quarter, so it was still 30-9 going into the fourth quarter, down 21 points. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is wrong. They could have scored 19 because you can't get. It's got to be 14 because 9 and 14 would be 23. So they didn't score 19 points because 9 and 19 would be 28. But they were still down. They were down 30-9 going into the fourth quarter. So you got some stats here. I mean, both teams. I mean, Washington had 254 yards rushing. The Eagles had, but they had 44 carries. The Eagles on only 31 carries had 212 yards rushing. Both teams had about 155 yards passing. But Very, very, very exciting game. All right, so let's go to the Evening Star, Washington, D.C. paper. The November 2nd, 1959 edition of the Evening Star. As soon as I find it, there we go. All right. Redskins rally falls yard shy of gaining a tie. This is Jim Brown scoring a touchdown against the Colts. Bosler stopped 3 times as the Eagles line holds. For a while at Philadelphia yesterday, it appeared that the Redskins were using a week-old script borrowed from their Eagles to top off another heartstopper with Professor Buck Shaw's pupils. If they were, they muffed the punchline in losing a 30-23 decision. Last week, the Eagles erased a 24-0 deficit to nip the Chicago Cardinals 28-24. Yesterday, they were in front 30-9 going into the last quarter when the Redskins kicked up a storm. 30 seconds before the finish, the Eagles ate dirt to stave off a third Redskin touchdown and to preserve their victory. They ate it willingly. The Redskins weren't going to win. There wasn't enough time to get another touchdown or even a field goal, even they scored. So obviously this is 1959. It's when the clock strikes it's over. So the best they could have done, obviously the Redskins could have done if they scored. There ain't no 2-point conversions, ain't no overtime, ain't none of this stuff. They would have scored and kicked the extra point, and the game would have been a tie. Let me see. Got some of the stats there. I mean, each team had quite a bit of yardage. So the Redskins there wasn't enough time to get another touchdown or even a field goal if they scored and somehow regained possession of the ball following the kickoff. A missed extra point earlier in the fray took care of that, but a tie would have satisfied their TV audience and Washington fans in the crowd of 39,854 who saw the battle on a gusty, cloud-flecked day at Franklin Field. Cloud-flecked. There you go. You don't usually hear that terminology being brought. Last week, the Eagles made 2 great goal line stands to beat the Cardinals, but neither could have packed the drama, suspense, and satisfaction of yesterday's exhibition. 3 times, Don Bosler, the Redskins' weary ball-packing hero, tried to bowl his way over from the 1-yard line. 3 times the line held, although Bosler insists half of him was over the final chalk stripe on his second attempt. Officially, he was a foot away after being inches from the goal when the Eagles took the ball on downs. It would have been a memorable yard for Bosler, not only gaining a tie for the team, but a new Redskin ground-gaining record for himself. The former Miami Ace finished with 168 yards on 23 carries, matching Frank Atkins' mark made on 24 carries against the Eagles on October 21st, 1945. There were plenty of highlights. Yesterday's affair played on a soggy field that was treacherous in spots and had everything for a thriller but a suspicious butler. It was broken up into a number of sidelights featured by Bosler's ground-gaining duel with Bill Barnes, in which both got off long scoring runs. Mild-mannered Richie McCabe enlivened the proceedings by taking punches at Tommy McDonald and old Norm Van Brocklin. Paige Cothran and, all right, let's go to the same thing, the November 2nd, 1959 edition of the Evening Star. Redskins failed by yard to get a tie with the Eagles. So we finished up with Paige Cothran and the Redskins' Sam Baker. Actually, it's interesting because later on in his career, Sam Baker would be the field goal kicker for the Philadelphia Eagles. Sandbaker matched field goals, and Jim Podoley and McDonald tossed in diving catches of touchdown passes. LeBaron's biggest contribution, perhaps, was a week's supply of fuel for the grandstand quarterback sessions. The question was raised immediately whether Eddie was right in giving the ball 3 straight times to the leg-weary Bosler against a 9-man line loaded with muscle and bristling with determination. Good point. And at least one source questioned the pass he threw with only 45 seconds to play in the first half. It was intercepted by Chuck Weber, setting up what proved to be Philadelphia's winning touchdown. It was only 16-9 at the time, and the Eagles weren't overpowering anybody when the Redskins suffered a defensive lapse that let the Philadelphians out of a hole with less than 2 minutes before the intermission. As usual, it was a third-down situation with 9 to go when Van Brocklin, after appearing to be trapped behind the line, rifled a 13-yard shot to Clarence Peaks on the Washington 47-yard line. Peaks picked up 14 yards more on a draw play and 11 on another pass from Van Brocklin before the latter pitched a 22-yard six-pointer to Bobby Walston. That was bad enough, but when LeBaron uncorked the throw that Weber gathered in, the Redskins' goose was cooked. The chunky linebacker ran 8 yards before lateraling to the speedier Jim Carr, who added 26 more before being bounced out of bounds on the Washington's 3-yard line. But by getting out of bounds, Carr stopped the clock, and 6 seconds before the half ended, Van Brocklin lobbed the ball to McDonald, who grabbed it in a swan dive in the end zone. Now, today, right, I mean, when possessions change, or else maybe, the clock stops. It doesn't. Back then, the clock would run. They would set the ball or whatever. Teams would come out on get their guys out, and then the official would wind the clock, and the clock would start running. It's not like that anymore. Otherwise, Eddie had a fair day, completing 9 of 21 passes for 155 yards. 2 misses were dropped by the so-called receivers. Van Brocklin hit on 13 of 19, a very impressive day, 2/3 of his passes, for 154 yards, but he didn't give the Redskins as much trouble as the sure-footed Barnes and a bewildered, blundering secondary defense in the first half. Barnes ran 61 yards for the Eagles' first touchdown early in the first quarter, after the disorganized Redskins secondary allowed Van Brocklin to hit Dick Bielski, a former Marylander, with a 31-yard pass. Walston missed the conversion. Barnes' 17-yard run helped put the ball in position for Cothran's 42-yard field goal some 4 minutes later, and another 17-yard gallop by former Wake Forest star helped set up a 2-yard touchdown plunge by Peaks 4 seconds after the start of the second period. 41-yard scoring run by Bosler featured the Redskins' 80-yard advance for the first touchdown early in the same quarter. Dick James was the key player on the next Washington drive, a 47-yard march that bogged down on the Eagles' 10, giving Baker a chance to exercise his talented toe from the 24. Then the Eagles got their 2 quickies, and it looked like Washington was through for the day. The Redskins missed a possible score on the second play of the game when Podoley dropped Ed Sutton's lone throw of the day on the Eagle 42. There was daylight ahead, and if the former Central Michigan Flyer hadn't made it, he at least would have been close, I guess, to scoring a touchdown. That's why you'll notice that like all the passes were thrown by Eddie LeBaron, but there was one thrown by Ed Sutton. And Ken McAfee, picked up from the Eagles a week ago, also missed one right in the breadbasket that probably would have saved the Redskins one of those 2 disastrous touchdowns before the half. Even sticky-fingered Bill Anderson missed one early in the game, but the Tennessean caught 2 others. The second was good for 49 yards to the Philadelphia's 4-yard line, setting up the dramatic but futile finish. Ralph Felton's interception of a Van Brocklin pass on the Eagle 42 started the Redskins off on their second touchdown march. LeBaron's 14-yard pass to Podoley and 9-yard toss to James moved the ball to the 10, and Bosler, James, and Haley nudged it to the 1-yard stripe before Bosler went over. A couple of minutes later, Bob Toneff gave his teammates another scoring chance by latching on to Peek's fumble on the Philadelphia 28. A holding penalty against the Eagles was the big gainer of this series, preceding LeBaron's 8-yard toss to Podoley in the end zone. McCabe's brawl with McDonald and a 30-yard jaunt by Barnes kept the Eagles' last drive going longer than warranted, ending with an unsuccessful 42-yard field goal attempt by Cawthorn. The Redskins went 79 yards in 11 plays, aided by a 15-yard penalty against Philadelphia for roughing LeBaron before the Eagles came through with their victory-clinching goal line stand. All right, so we got a couple more here for you. A couple more. Got the Daily News, and I believe it's the Philadelphia Bulletin. So we're going to start, I think, with the Bulletin first here. All right, here we go. The Philadelphia Bulletin. Eagles win. Line held for stand. There we go. Peak performance by Peaks. Eagles running back Clarence Peaks soars over the Redskins player and own teammate Stan Campbell on the way to a short gain yesterday at Franklin Field. Clarence Peaks, the Eagles' soft-spoken, hard-running fullback, expressed it better than anybody else when he said, "If this keeps up, I'm going to have heart failure by the time I'm 26. I just couldn't stand many more like that." Excuse me just a second. Oh, my dog's at my feet. Sorry, I got a hard time getting situated here. Clarence, who has had a couple of years to go before meeting up with the cardiac complications he dreads, was referring to the 30-23 heart stopper that the embattled Eagles pulled out over the Washington Redskins before a gasping audience of 39,854 in Franklin Field yesterday. This was the second game in a week that the Eagles had and their followers palpitating on a peak. Last Sunday in Minneapolis, they brushed aside a 24-0 third period deficit to stun the Cardinals 28-24. Yesterday, the scenario was reversed. This cliffhanger found them squandering 14 points of the 30-9 halftime lead and holding on the 1 foot line after 4 successive downs with less than 1 minute to play in the final quarter. Bob Pellegrini, the beetle-browed linebacker, was asked what the Eagles said to each other as they tossed back Don Bosler, a brilliant up-the-middle performer, until the very end of 3 straight lunges. Pellegrini said, "We just prayed he wouldn't make it." Bosler, who ground out 168 yards and 2 touchdowns and 23 carries before he met his latest gasp nemesis, claimed he did make it on the first time he carried the ball after Dick Haley split right tackle from the 4 to the 2. But the officials, who were right on top of the ball, said he didn't. Their judgment stood enough, but whatever, for the Eagles. Got this thing right here. Looks like a pile of hair or something, whatever that is. I don't know. Of stars yesterday under sunlight that flashed fitfully through leaden clouds, there were many. Halfback Billy Barnes again was the murderous slasher, leading all back percentage-wise with 163 yards and 13 carries, including a 61-yard touchdown sprint for the best afternoon since joining the Eagles 3 years ago. Peaks recovered fully from a pulled thigh muscle, also had a spectacular session running for 57 yards on 12 carries, scoring a touchdown and catching 6 of Norman Brocklin's throws for 40 yards. Peaks blocking on pass defense and for Barnes' runs was just about flawless. For the Redskins, Little Eddie LeBaron, just recovered from an ankle injury, was again the magnificent passer and field general. The 5'6" gamester just missed making the Eagles his ninth victim in 11 appearances against them, dating back to the All-Star game in 1950. Asked if he could fault himself on sending Bosler into the middle of the three straight occasions instead of trying a wide sweep or off-tackle slant, LeBaron said, "I might have been wrong, but I probably would have called the same play again. After all, the shortest distance between 2 points is right up the middle." Eagles head coach Buck Shaw could hardly contain his excitement over the fourth victory, twice as many as he accomplished in his first season with the Locals. He said that the Redskins' ability to run through the Eagles' defense for 254 yards, the most gained against them this season, surprised him. The Eagles' offensive line did some hard blocking too, and Barnes did some beautiful faking and slashing on the way to a 7-0 lead early in the first period. Launching the drive from the 12, Van Brocklin threw 31 yards to Dick Bielski. Barnes then slashed off left tackle, cut in, faked three Redskins silly, and aided by key blocks by Jerry Huth, J.D. Smith, and Tommy McDonald, robbed 61 yards to score. Bobby Walston kicked the point. It was Barnes who set up an Eagle 10-0 lead at 9:18 in the first period by turning the end for 17 yards to the Washington 42. He and Peaks aided 6 more, and Paige Cothran, the new field goal kicker, booted a three-pointer from the 46. The Eagles made it 16-0 at 4 seconds of the second period with a 69-yard, 7-play assault featuring a 28-yard pass to Pete Retzlaff and a 17-yard dart by Barnes on a bewildering fake from Van Brocklin. A pass interference penalty gave the Eagles the ball on the 8. Theron Sapp bowled to the 2, and Peaks rammed over the middle for the score. Walston missed his first PAT in 51 tries over 2 seasons. The Redskins rebounded with an 80-yard scoring drive in which they used trap plays liberally to make it 16-6 at 5:15 of the second period. In this sortie, Bosler piled up a total of 67 yards, scoring from 41 yards out on a quick opener. Sam Baker's point kick was blocked. So instead of 16-7, it was 16-6. At 12:29 of the second period, the Redskins were still making it interesting, racking up 3 more points on Baker's field goal from the 24. But with 2 incredible minutes, the Eagles made it 30-9. Art Powell, the long-legged gazelle, sprang off with a 41-yard kickoff return. Peake scored a 13-yard flip from Van Brocklin, ran 14 yards on a draw play, and took a swinger to the 22. Walston, all alone in the left, then grabbed a pass from Van Brocklin on the 8 and darted over untouched. Bobby also kicked the point. There's only 45 seconds left to go in the first half. The Skins tried to battle back, but the former Eagle giant end, Ken McAfee, dropped a pass in the clear, and linebacker Chuck Weber got in the way of another LeBaron throw. He took it on the 43, lateral to Jim Carr on the 39, and that fleet-footed defensive back raced down to the 3. Now, had Ken McAfee caught the ball, dropped the pass. Had he caught the ball, time would have ran. The Eagles never would have picked the pass off, ran it back, and scored a touchdown. So then at the end of the game, possibly the Redskins just might have needed a field goal from the 1-yard line instead of trying to score a touchdown. That's why every play matters, right? Mocking the Redskins, Van Brocklin faked a handoff to Peaks, then looped a scoring pass to McDonald, who grabbed it falling with only 16 seconds left in the half. Walston added another point. The third period was scoreless, although the Eagles had some narrow escapes, but in the fourth came the deluge that almost deprived them of victory. An interception by Sam Felton on the Eagle 41 provided the spark, which sent Bosler over from the 1 to make it 30-16, with some 12 minutes left in the game. Fumble by Peaks, picked up by Bob Toneff on the 27, plus a penalty to the 13, I guess half the distance to the goal, put the Redskins deeper in contention. LeBaron rolled to his right and passed to Jim Poley for the score. The Eagles countered with an offensive to the Redskins' 20, but Barnes fighting off 3 tacklers in a 30-yard open field run, but a 15-yard holding penalty hurt the hometowners, and Cothran was short on a field goal try from the 42. This set the stage for one of the most sensational finishes in pro football history. 15-yard penalty against the Eagles for blasting a potential receiver, even when the ball wasn't in the air, gave the Redskins life on the 47. 3 of LeBaron's long throws failed, and then the little fellow did the most unexpected. With the Eagles expecting him to throw short for a first down, Eddie fired 49 yards to Bill Anderson, who caught the ball between Tom Brookshire and Lee Riley on the 3. The rest was told. Chuck Bednarik, inserted again on defense for the goal line stand, led the cheering. Pellegrini led the praying, and he wasn't alone. All right, so that was the Philadelphia Bulletin, I guess the Evening Bulletin, the November 2nd edition of the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin. And this would be the Philadelphia Daily News, as you see over here, November 2nd, 1959 edition of the Daily News. If you want to know what Larry Merchant, if you know who Larry Merchant is, let's picture him in, I guess, 1959. In the heat of the battle. So where are we at here time-wise here? Oh, okay, we're doing good. Okay, cool. Football game of cool violence. A hothead may have lost the game for the Redskins yesterday. A cool head nearly won it for them. The hothead was Richie McCabe, a defensive halfback. The cool head was Eddie LeBaron, who needs no introduction. McCabe, a 4-year veteran out of Pittsburgh, cost his team precious time in the fourth quarter when he deliberately and blatantly tried to maim Tommy McDonald in the open field. The Eagles were leading by the final score of 30-23 with 4 and a fraction minutes remaining in the game, and the Redskins were coming. On third down, a long yardage Norm Van Brocken completed a pass over the middle to McDonald, 3 yards short of a first down. The Eagles would have been forced to punt from their own 25. McDonald was tackled, and McCabe swooped in from the side like an enraged animal and fetched the Eagle an elbow to the head. It proved harmless to McDonald, who still has that hairline fracture of the jaw, but deadly to the skins, a 15-yard penalty and a first down. Stupid penalty. Washington coach Mike Nixon immediately yanked McCabe and blistered him with a cauldron of incentive that could have burned off the ears of the devil himself. McCabe cringed at the end of the bench. Stupid. Now the thing is that with because he's going in there throwing an elbow at Tommy McDonald. Tommy McDonald never wore a face mask, so he might have been trying to get an elbow in there at his face too. So but that wasn't too clever. Nixon might have said if he was the coach of the Princeton 150-pounders. However, as the leader of the national capital's 250-pounders, he certified later that his choice of syllables was not meant for the Loretta Young show. So impressed was McCabe, who earlier had been faked out of his red skin by Bill Barnes on a 61-yard touchdown caper, that when Nixon simmered down and beckoned him to return to the fray, he shuddered and recoiled in a catatonic pose. Who, me? Yes, you know good. Yes, you no good. Each time the Eagles had advanced the ball, Nixon had pivoted and shouted impassioned epithets at McCabe. He couldn't believe that the coach had any further use for him. Well, the Eagles were stopped, and a 42-yard field goal attempt by Paige Cothran went wide, giving the ball to the visitors on their own 20. There was still 3 minutes left. Still time. Enter Master LeBaron, cool head. Enter into the Franklin Field pressure chamber and the element of smoldering tension. Enter drama. Quarterback Eddie LeBaron is 5'7" high. of course, and is one of the aesthetic sights of professional sport to see him engineer a team downfield, dodging monsters like a puppy dodging the dog catchers. There is no better faker and field general. Guile in his muscle is his muscle. 4 times on this day, his guile was faultless. Behind the Redskins' driving offensive line, he faked to this one and gave to that one for 8 yards. Gave to that one and faked to that one for 9 in sequences that seemed to spring to life out of a football notebook. Then suddenly, it was all focused on one play. 4th down and 10 to go on the Skins' 47. LeBaron struck, executing the perfect maneuver. He faked a rollout and fired a strike to end Bill Anderson. The ball was on the Eagle 4. Well, you'll notice in the other ads, the other articles, it said it got down to the Eagle 3. But LeBaron sent Dick Haley through the tackle to the 1 and determined that workhorse Don Bosler would apply the equalizer. But the Eagles denied him 3 times, rising like hippopotami from a pond to thwart his lunges. The mob erupted in deafening tribal war cries before, during, after each failure. Now I know I should have gone outside, the little man mourned later, although his coach defended him. I might have changed it on the last down, but the noise was so loud I could barely hear myself barking signals. It seemed to echo back and forth across the field. Acoustically speaking, it was a triumph for the Loudheads. We got a picture over here. Even with quarterback Gator LeBaron giving helping shove, Redskins Don Bosler and Heap can't crack solid Eagle defensive wall from 6-inch line. Eagle held 4 times in the final seconds to win. Number 66 is the Eagles' Joe Robb. So this would be Eddie LeBaron right here. This is Bosler. I guess he's trying to shove him across the line. Now, if that was Walter Payton, he would have just jumped over the line or leaped over the line. Goal achieved by the Eagles. The difference between this year's Eagles and last year's is that last year's Sam Baker would have made the extra point and Don Bosler would have scored the winning touchdown with 25 seconds left, and the Redskins would have won 31-30, and the Eagles would cuss their tough luck. Instead, Baker missed, Bosler missed, and the Eagles jogged off Franklin Field with Bedlam ringing inside their plastic hats. Instead, the Eagles won 30-23. The direct and obvious reason why the Eagles delighted 39,854 fans and doubled their 1958 victory production to a second place 4 was a heroic goal line stand. Thus, Billy Barnes was replaced, or at least equaled, as the day's darling by 11 muddy-nosed characters named Joe Robb, Jerry Wilson, Chuck Bednarik, Marion Campbell, Jesse Richardson, Don Owens, Tom Catlin, Bob Pellegrini, Art Powell, Jim Carr, and Tom Brookshire. What they did was behave like an animated Magnat line against 4 tank-like rushes from the 4-yard line. What they did was hurl back a Washington line that had opened up 254 yards worth of holes, and a 215-pound charger, Bosler, who I personally accounted for 168 yards of them. That beamed coach Buckshaw is what amazed me. If you remember last year, the Redskins pushed us all over the field in the last quarter. We couldn't get the ball away from them. Now, this, I guess you could say, is determination. You could and more. When it happens once, you might say you're lucky, said line coach Nick Skorich. But when it happens 4 times, it isn't luck. We've stopped some pretty good clubs down close. And more, and once again, is that ball of hair or whatever that is there. We didn't have a real good line team last year like the Giants with Roosevelt Brown, explained Bednarik. He and rookie Robb replaced Chuck Weber and added beef and something to the last ditchers. What's where football said the veteran employed essentially as Something center. My job there and fire everybody up, brother. They were. I guess that's when they're talking about maybe Bednair going in on defense. Scourge outlined the theory. Oh, Scourge outlined the theory. We call it a gap 8. He said they line up in the seams between the offensive linemen and drive in low. We practiced on it for a half hour in Hershey. The other side was gloomy. Quarterback Eddie LeBaron second-guessed himself, volunteering that he should have tried something else on fourth down. After Dick Haley went to the 1, he called on Bosler 3 times. Owner George Preston Marshall and coach Mike Nixon refused to blame LeBaron. Marshall thought Bosler should have dived over the wall of flesh or climbed over it or something. Nixon bemoaned other Redskin ill fortune. Yeah, he should have, instead of just trying to just dive over it. All you got to do is dive. Just get the ball over. We lost the game in the last minute of the first half, he said. It was just too much to recover from. That was where the difference in this year's Eagles was also told. A difference in forcing breaks and capitalizing on them. A difference in executing the little important phases of the game. 2 vital categories. The Eagles had recovered 11 enemy fumbles and lost only 4. Have intercepted 12 passes and have only thrown 6. The Eagles had gone ahead 16-9 on Barnes' 61-yard gallop. He gained 163 yards and 13 lugs for his biggest pro show and a 69-yard drive. Field goal by Paige Cothran, the team's first in 10. Another little thing. Then the Redskins got 9 points back on an 80-yard move, capped by Bosler's 41-yarder and Baker's 24-yard field goal. There was more. Whoops. But very, very entertaining game, as you can see. Got down. Now, yeah, and there's all things you go back and look. I mean, the drop pass or so toward, had maybe McAfee held on to the pass, right? Maybe the Redskins probably would have ran the clock out maybe in the first half, and the Eagles never would have got that other touchdown. When they got down to the 1-yard line, instead of giving it to Bosler 3 times, should he have tried to, instead of just getting the ball, I'm going to run through everybody and just maybe try to dive over the pile, or maybe go out wide, or maybe roll out and maybe throw a pass, or if it's not there, try to get it. Whatever it is, what it is. But that's why stuff like that, every play matters. And unfortunately the Redskins dug themselves too much of a hole. To come back from. Now there's still plenty of time. It was 30-9. It was at halftime. So you're down by quite a bit. But they obviously didn't. There was no scoring in the third quarter, so it was still 30-9 going into the fourth quarter. The Redskins came back, but it was a little too late. So that's the way it was on this date, November 1st, 1959, as the Washington Redskins played the Philadelphia Eagles in Franklin Field. Pro football, first 50 years. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.